She can barely hold a job. My mom testified against me. The Chief Justice stood up. She's been a judge for 5 years. My mom's face went pale. My name is Lyra Wilson. I'm 41 years old. And I discovered that family loyalty crumbles like old paper when my own mother stood up in my ex-husband's custody hearing and called me a complete failure. Your Honor, my daughter has always been irresponsible. My mother's voice rang through the crowded family courtroom like a death sentence. She can barely hold down a job. She's been jumping from one thing to another her whole life. Frankly, I don't believe she should have custody of my grandson, little Cameron. I sat at the defendant's table in my simple charcoal suit and cream blouse, my auburn hair pulled back in the same professional style I'd worn for 12 years. The wedding band I'd finally removed 8 months ago had left a pale indent on my finger that seemed to mock me under the harsh fluorescent lights. My ex-husband Derek smirked from across the aisle, his high-priced attorney nodding approvingly at my mother's character assassination. They'd orchestrated this ambush perfectly, knowing that my own mother's testimony would devastate any judge's opinion of me. She's never provided real stability, my mother continued, warming to her devastating theme. She disappears for days, sometimes weeks at a time. Claims she's working, but I've never seen any proof of steady employment. My grandson needs a proper home with his father, who has a successful accounting firm and can actually provide for him. 9-year-old Cameron sat in the front row beside my sister Janet, his bright blue eyes filled with confusion as he watched his grandmother tear his mother apart. Janet refused to meet my gaze, her silence cutting deeper than any words. I thought about the past 3 years since my divorce, about the sleepless nights I'd spent agonizing over custody arrangements while simultaneously handling some of the most critical cases in the federal court system. About the delicate balance I'd maintained between my judicial responsibilities and my role as Cameron's devoted mother. She lives in some cramped apartment downtown, my mother pressed on ruthlessly, drives that beat-up Honda, can barely afford Cameron's baseball equipment. Meanwhile, Derek has a gorgeous house in Maplewood Heights, a stable 6-figure income, and can give that boy everything he deserves. Judge Elizabeth Hartford sat behind the bench, her expression carefully neutral as she absorbed the testimony. She was a colleague I'd known for over 8 years, someone who understood the demanding nature of our profession, but she showed no flicker of recognition as she maintained the impartial facade required by judicial ethics. Furthermore, my mother declared, building to her crescendo, Lyra has always been secretive about this so-called career of hers. She claims to have some important position, but she won't tell us what she actually does. For all we know, she could be mixed up in something shady, something that puts my grandson at risk. The courtroom buzzed with shocked murmurs. Derek's extended family filled the left side of the gallery, all nodding along with my mother's brutal testimony. My side sat nearly empty, just 3 close friends who'd taken personal days to support me. People who actually knew the truth about my profession. Derek's attorney, Richard Blackstone, rose to address the court with theatrical confidence. Your Honor, we believe this testimony clearly demonstrates that the child's best interests would be served by awarding full custody to my client. The mother's inability to provide basic financial security, combined with her mysterious and possibly questionable employment situation, raises serious red flags about her parental fitness. I remained perfectly still, my hands folded calmly before me, watching this carefully planned destruction unfold. 12 years of federal judicial experience had taught me the crucial importance of timing, of allowing others to fully reveal their intentions before showing your cards. Ms. Wilson, Judge Hartford addressed me directly, her voice cutting through the courtroom's tension. How do you respond to these serious allegations regarding your employment status and your ability to adequately provide for your son? I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled, drawing on every ounce of the authority I'd cultivated over more than a decade on the federal bench. Your Honor, I would like to call a witness who can directly address those concerns. Derek's lawyer looked genuinely puzzled. Your Honor, we weren't given notice of any witnesses on the plaintiff's witness list. The witness only became available this morning, I replied with calm precision, but I believe his testimony will completely clarify any questions about my employment circumstances. My voice carried the quiet confidence that had served me well in countless high-stakes legal proceedings. Judge Hartford nodded thoughtfully. Very well, Ms. Wilson. Please call your witness. I walked to the heavy oak courtroom doors and pulled them open with steady hands. A distinguished man in an immaculate navy suit entered, his silver hair perfectly styled, his bearing commanding instant respect throughout the room. The subtle authority in his posture made every person present sit up straighter. "Your Honor," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly hushed courtroom, "I'd like to call Chief Judge Thomas Richardson of the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit to the witness stand." The collective gasp that swept through the courtroom was audible and sharp. My mother's expression transformed from smug confidence to bewildered confusion to dawning horror as the Chief Judge of the Federal Appeals Court walked purposefully to the witness stand. Even Judge Hartford's carefully maintained neutrality flickered with surprise. Cameron's eyes grew wide with wonder as he watched this impressive man take his oath, though he couldn't yet understand the earth-shattering significance of this moment. "Chief Judge Richardson," I began, my voice taking on the authoritative tone that had commanded respect in federal courtrooms for 12 years. "Could you please identify me for this court and describe my current professional position?" Chief Judge Richardson looked directly at me, his voice formal yet warm with unmistakable respect. "You are the Honorable Lyra Wilson, United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, where you have served with exceptional distinction for the past 12 years. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I could hear my mother's sharp, shocked intake of breath. I could see Derek's expensive attorney frantically shuffling through his papers, searching for something, anything, that might salvage his case. "And Chief Judge Richardson," I continued with professional composure, "could you describe the scope and nature of my judicial responsibilities?" "Judge Wilson presides over some of our most complex federal civil and criminal cases," he replied with obvious pride. "She sits on our appellate panel for death penalty appeals, chairs our Judicial Ethics Oversight Committee, and has authored several landmark decisions regarding family law, civil rights, and child welfare that are now cited in law schools across the nation." Cameron stared at me with a mixture of amazement and dawning pride as he finally began to understand why his mother had to work such long hours, why she sometimes disappeared into her study with thick legal briefs, why she spoke with such natural authority about fairness and justice. "One final question, Chief Judge," I said, building toward the moment that would shatter every lie told about me today. "Could you address the allegations that have been made regarding my financial stability and ability to provide for my son?" He smiled slightly, clearly relishing this opportunity to set the record straight. "Judge Wilson earns an annual salary of $223,000, plus comprehensive federal benefits. She owns her downtown Philadelphia penthouse outright, maintains a vacation home in the Pocono Mountains, and has a substantial retirement portfolio. Her financial disclosure forms are part of the public record, as required for all sitting federal judges." Derek sat frozen in his chair, staring at me as if seeing a complete stranger for the first time in his life. I turned to face the courtroom where my mother sat with her mouth hanging open, her carefully constructed web of lies dissolving around her like sugar in rain. "Your Honor," I addressed Judge Hartford with the quiet dignity I'd maintained throughout this ordeal, "I'd like to explain to the court why my family remained unaware of my judicial appointment." Judge Hartford leaned forward with obvious interest. "Please proceed, Judge Wilson." 12 years ago, when I was confirmed to the federal district court at age 29, making me one of the youngest federal judges in Pennsylvania history, I made a conscious decision to separate my professional life from my personal relationships. This wasn't because I felt ashamed of my work, quite the opposite, actually. I looked at Cameron, whose face showed a beautiful mixture of pride and confusion as he processed this revelation about his mother. I wanted my son to have a completely normal childhood, free from the pressure and public scrutiny that inevitably comes with being a federal judge's child. I chose to live modestly, to drive a practical car, to shop at regular stores instead of upscale boutiques. I wanted Cameron to understand the true value of hard work and humility, not to grow up feeling entitled because of his mother's position. Derek was staring at me in complete shock. During our 8-year marriage, he had constantly criticized my boring courthouse job, never once bothering to ask about the actual details of my work or showing any interest in my career aspirations. "The reason I'm frequently unavailable for extended periods," I continued, "is because I'm presiding over complex federal cases that can span weeks or months. The reason I sometimes missed school events is because I was writing legal decisions that affect thousands of families throughout Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware." Chief Judge Richardson spoke up with evident pride. "If I may add, Your Honor, Judge Wilson possesses one of the finest legal minds I've encountered in 35 years on the federal bench. Her judicial decisions have been upheld by the Supreme Court, and she's received national recognition for her groundbreaking work in family law and civil rights." I walked back to what everyone had called the defendant's table, but I wasn't a defendant anymore. I was what I'd always been, a sitting federal judge with 12 years of distinguished legal experience and a national reputation for fairness, integrity, and judicial excellence. Your Honor, I said to Judge Hartford, my voice strong with conviction, I've dedicated my entire legal career to protecting children and families. I've written judicial decisions that have removed children from abusive situations, ensured fair custody arrangements, and consistently placed child welfare above all other considerations. I've safeguarded the rights of thousands of families from the federal bench. The courtroom remained completely silent, hanging on every word. The allegation that I'm somehow unfit to care for my own son is not only completely false, it's insulting to every family I've protected and every child whose best interests I've championed from the federal bench. My voice grew stronger with righteous conviction. I turned to look directly at my mother, who had gone deathly pale. What makes this particularly painful is that these devastating allegations come from people who never bothered to ask about my work, who showed no genuine interest in my career achievements, who automatically assumed the worst without ever seeking the truth. Derek's lawyer was clearly scrambling to salvage something from this disaster. Your Honor, we had absolutely no knowledge of. Of what? I interrupted firmly. Of the fact that your client was married to a sitting federal judge for 6 years and never bothered to learn what she actually did for a living? Judge Hartford leaned forward intently. Mr. Blackstone, are you telling this court that your client was unaware of his wife's profession throughout their entire marriage? Derek finally found his voice, stammering helplessly. She said she worked at the federal courthouse. I thought she was maybe a clerk or paralegal or something. The sheer absurdity of his admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I'd been married to a man who assumed I was a courthouse clerk for 6 years, who never questioned why I worked 16-hour days, why I brought home complex federal case files, why I frequently traveled to judicial conferences and legal seminars. Your Honor, I said, addressing Judge Hartford with the full authority of my position, I'd like to submit my federal judicial performance evaluations, my financial disclosure statements, and my custody evaluation report prepared by Dr. Patricia Mansfield, a court-appointed child psychologist. Judge Hartford reviewed the documents with growing amazement. Dr. Mansfield rated you as an exemplary parent with exceptionally strong bonds to your child and absolutely no concerns regarding your ability to provide outstanding care and guidance. I looked around the courtroom one final time, at my mother who couldn't bear to meet my eyes, at my sister who looked deeply ashamed, at my ex-husband who stared at the floor in humiliation, and at Cameron who gazed at me with newfound understanding and bursting pride. Your Honor, I declared, I've dedicated my career to ensuring that children's best interests always come first in custody decisions. I've witnessed firsthand what happens when parents weaponize children, when family members betray each other for personal gain, when assumptions replace evidence and truth. My voice grew stronger with absolute conviction. I'm requesting full physical custody of my son with supervised visitation for the father pending his completion of mandatory co-parenting classes. I'm also requesting that all future custody matters be handled without involvement from extended family members who have demonstrated willingness to provide false testimony under oath. Judge Hartford nodded grimly. Given the compelling evidence presented and the deeply concerning testimony provided by the defendant's mother, I'm granting full custody to Judge Wilson. Visitation for the father will be supervised for 6 months with possible revision following successful completion of court-ordered parenting classes. As the courtroom emptied, Cameron ran to me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Mom, why didn't you tell me you were a real judge? He whispered with awe. I knelt to his level, my heart full. Because I wanted you to love me for being your mom, not because of my job title. I think it's incredible, he said, grinning widely. Does this mean you can send bad guys to prison? Sometimes, I admitted with a smile. But mostly I help families figure out how to take better care of each other. 6 months later, Derek completed his parenting classes and earned unsupervised visitation. He never remarried, and he never again questioned my ability to provide for our son. My mother sent multiple letters of apology, but I never responded. Some betrayals reveal too much about someone's true character to simply forgive and forget. Today, Cameron proudly tells his friends that his mom is a federal judge. He's learned about justice, fairness, and standing up for what's right. He's also learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you most can hurt you deepest, but that never diminishes your worth. As for me, I learned that hiding your achievements doesn't protect you, it just makes it easier for others to underestimate you. I stopped hiding who I was, started celebrating my accomplishments, and taught my son that integrity and hard work deserve recognition. Justice, it turns out, isn't just something you serve from the bench. Sometimes it's something you must claim for yourself.